Welcome to Sales, Tax, and More, your go-to resource for all things state tax related. Now, here is your host, Michael Fleming.
Hi, Mike Fleming here, founder of Sales, Tax, and More, and today's co-host of the Sales, Tax, and More podcast, where we talk about everyone's favorite topic, sales tax. Of course, sales tax is everyone's favorite topic. But we've decided to have guests who are experts in their field who can speak about subjects that are of interest to our entire audience. And today we've got a great guest. But before we introduce him, I want to introduce you to Ellie Moffitt, my co-host. Ellie, you want to jump in here and say hi?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Very excited to be here today. We have a great guest on today. I just want to do a quick introduction for Sales, Tax, and More. Sales, Tax, and More is a full-service consulting and solutions firm. We have a really great team here of experienced tax professionals who are very dedicated to fulfilling all of your state tax or related needs. So we do a lot of returns, registrations, consultations, research, and like our name states, more. So if you have questions about our services, please reach out to us. You can do that at Moffitt, M-O-F as in Frank, F as in Frank, A as in Apple, T as in Tom, at salestaxandmore.com. So back over to you, Mike.
Oh, thank you very much, Ellie. So today's guest is Balthasar Wyss, and he's the Vice President, Customer Success and Operations for FlavorCloud, which is a leading cross-border international shipping company. And to sum it up, they have the services that help your brand go global easily. So prior to joining FlavorCloud, Balthasar was the channel strategy, business development, and partner manager at Avalara, who's a leading provider of sales tax and compliance solutions. And that's where I met him. And I immediately liked him. He's a real great guy, but he also has a great positive approach to problem resolutions. He's a great outside-the-box thinker, and talk about smart. I mean, he's got a master's degree in social psychology and business administration. He's got a PhD in mass communication science from the University of Zurich in Switzerland. He's also a postgraduate fellow in behavioral sciences at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. I mean, Balthasar, you're making me feel a little bit less than here. You got all of this, all of these degrees. I mean, actually, I'm just giving you a hard time, but thank you very much for being on today. And, you know, we're hearing more and more about cross-border. And this is a subject that I think our audience really wants to hear about. And, you know, right away, I thought of you. Who better than you to tell us about cross-border? So what exactly is considered cross-border? Let's start there.
Hi, everybody, and thanks a lot for the introduction, Mike. I really appreciate it and love working with you and Ellie and your team. Fantastic collaboration. Cross-border, in its simplest thing, is a shipment of a goods or a service from one country to another. Say somebody in France purchases some shoe or some other item from a merchant who has a warehouse in the United States or in Mexico or in China or wherever that is. So that's in the simplest thing, cross-border, shipping from one country to another.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for that, Balt. So really, I think another question we have here is what is driving the cross-border conversation in the first place? Why is everyone talking about it? Why is this a hot topic?
Well, I think it's a good way to start with the consumer who's at the heart of all of this. People buying abroad, essentially. And as the world is becoming smaller and smaller and more connected and connected, it is much more easier these days to buy something and have it shipped from far away. So that is really what's driving it. If you do a little bit the click down of it, there's some trends which really make cross-border an interesting topic and in the minds of everybody. So first of all, consumer with the internet have more and more choice, right? They can go buy in the physical world. They can go to a store or they can go online. And online you find millions of merchants selling their items. And so they really want to have choice. Today, it's an expectation that you don't have just one item or one store you can go to, but you can go to anywhere and buy and compare. So choice is a big topic, and that drives cross-border, because you might find one item that you like from a different country, and then you want to buy it from there. The second one is kind of like around convenience, right? There's a lot of consumers who rely on easy shipment to receive it the next day or within a few days. It's at the doorstep. You can, within with a click, purchase it and so on. So all these things around the convenience are really important. And as the world gets more connected and in some sense smaller, and where you can buy everywhere, it also becomes more convenient to buy abroad. I mean, think about 50 years ago, how difficult it would have been to buy an item somewhere in a distant country. Today, with the internet, it's a piece of cake. Yeah, and then the third, I would say,
I was just going to interject here. Convenience. That's what we hear a lot about too. It's such a big factor, and even personally, I don't ever go to a mall anymore. I do all of my shopping online. So, convenience. So yeah, you're hitting the nail right on the head there. Didn't mean to interrupt you though. What's the next big factor?
Yeah, the last one I will mention. So we have choice, right? The consumer expect to have choice, convenience, the second one. And the third I want to mention is kind of like the infrastructure, which I've already alluded to, that there's a quick delivery and easy and simple. Again, this was very complicated 10 years ago even, right? And now it's become super easy to ship from anywhere to anywhere, really, because the infrastructure has improved, and the world has become a global mall, if you will, and with the internet and the channel carriers are becoming more sophisticated, and delivery mechanisms become more sophisticated. So it makes it actually possible to have that cross-border trade.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense to me too, Mike. I love to shop online. I love to have a lot of choices. I love for it to be convenient. And I want it to all get to me quickly. So this, I mean, it makes perfect sense. So how big is cross-border trade right now? I mean, obviously it's growing a lot. You mentioned 10 years ago, it was non-existent, more or less. So how big is it right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a good idea to separate two types of cross-border in a grand scheme of things. One is a wholesale or business to business, and then business to consumer. We at FlavorCloud focus on business to consumer, so I'm talking a little bit about that. Although I will say business to business cross-border trade is actually bigger still than business to consumer. But it's massive, business to consumer. Depending on the study you look at and the report you look at, it's in hundreds of billions. Some even say it's already reached $1 trillion. Wow. But it's like anywhere between 2 to 3 billion a day. I mean, it's an amazing number. 2 to 3 billion a day consumer shop abroad, whether that's Americans here based in the United States shopping international, or vice versa, somebody in Europe or in Asia or in South America shopping anywhere else in the world. So it's massive. And I give you a few more stats to show you how incredibly big this has become. There's studies showing that 70% of consumers make at least one purchase a year abroad, meaning cross-country. So they buy an item that is supplied from a different country. And another data point that might be interesting to your audience, 67% or about 2 in 3 spend about 10% of their monthly shopping budget cross-border. So that percentage of buying abroad as things become more connected and easier to shop is rapidly growing. So these are stunning numbers, and this happened literally in the last few years as the infrastructure has been built out, and obviously with the internet together. and with companies like Shopify and BigCommerce, who really enable anybody to become a merchant and sell globally with a click, right?
Absolutely. And, we knew that this was, a big opportunity. We're hearing about it all the time, and you've proved that point. I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit. We understand that there's great opportunity, but what are the key challenges? What do you got to look out for?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and there are challenges. Cross-border is very, very complex, which is good for us at FlavorCloud because we simplify and automate that, right? Just as you help your customers simplify and automate sales tax, we do the same for cross-border. Again, I would sort of mention a few points here in terms of challenges. I mentioned the infrastructure has become better, but it's still a challenge. There are hundreds of different carriers with different terms and different ways. And then some allow you to ship hazardous items, some don't. Some only deliver in certain zip codes, and so on. So the whole infrastructure and the physical infrastructure that is still very, very complicated. I mean, think about what it takes to ship a parcel, say, from the Philippines or from Bolivia to the United States. How many times it changes going on a plane or going on a boat and then getting to the local carrier. There's somebody scanning it and sending it to a distribution center. And from there, it goes on to destination. And so there's a lot of human handling still involved, although the infrastructure has become way, way, way better. So infrastructure remains a challenge. Although if you take somebody like FedEx and DHL, they're amazing in terms of their delivery capability these days. The second thing, and this is something we hear often from merchants, is around cultural differences. So we have merchants reaching out to us. They say, hey, I'm doing really well in the United States, selling in all states and do wonderfully. Now I want to go international. How do I do that? How do I market to people in France or my home country, Switzerland, right? Do I need to use local currency? Do I need to translate everything? How does that work? So cultural differences matter. And we see this in purchasing behavior. There are countries that really like a good delivery. Japan, interesting enough, most people order express. Interesting. Don't know why that is, but they order way more express than other nations do. So these cultural differences matter, and merchants should pay attention to, and particularly in terms of how they market to these different countries and audiences. And the last I want to mention, and that's at the forefront, if you just a little bit interested in politics, you have heard about all the trade policies and the tariff discussions that are going on right now, specifically with China, but with other markets as well. Just there was an article in the Wall Street Journal who talks that India is next in terms of the trade tariff conversation. So the trade policies change all the time. There are free trade agreements, other trade agreements, and as a result of that, the costs and the duties and taxes that have to be paid if you ship something across a border is changing all the time. So these are sort of three things I think are tremendous challenges for merchants: infrastructure, cultural differences, and trade policy. And they're on the forefront of the merchants we talk to, and that's what we hear from them.
Yeah, it really sounds like these are some big challenges that you've been going over, and it sounds like it's important for people to at least be aware of these challenges. So let's talk a little bit about compliance and trade policy. Yep. How should people who listen to this podcast be thinking about this topic?
Well, the most important thing I would say is duties and taxes and being compliant is not a nice to have. Right? It's a mandatory, it's a requirement. Just like in the United States, if a state collects sales taxes and you meet their minimum requirements, which you guys can talk about much better than I do, then you have to pay. It's not a nice to have, right? So that's the starting point. Unlike other things, you must be compliant. Otherwise, you will not be able to ship cross-border. And then I would look at different types of cross-border. There's really two categories that are critical here. One is taxes, right? You pay taxes, you would pay taxes on within the United States for domestic purchases or sales. And then the duties. Duties apply when you ship an items across borders. And it doesn't always apply, interesting enough. There's what's called a de minimis value, so a minimum threshold, if you will, that most countries have in place. To give you an example, Hong Kong, if you ship something to Hong Kong, for free, no duties. If you ship something to New Zealand, anything below 1,000 New Zealand dollars, which is about 650 US dollars, you don't pay any duty taxes, right? And so on. Every country has sort of different minimum thresholds. But for most countries, at some point, you will have to pay. And then the next question is, who is paying? You know, typically the merchants doesn't want to carry that cost. So the consumer pays it. And there's two ways to do that. You either can pay that at a checkout when you purchase online a good, or upon delivery when you receive the shipment. But duties typically apply. So that's sort of in a grand scheme the compliance that you have and that consumers and merchants have to deal with.
Balthasar, there's one other thing that I think you left out there. You know, so make sure that the person you decide to talk to knows what they're talking about. We get asked these questions all of the time, and I just have to tell people, hey, unfortunately, I can answer just about any question you have about state taxes here in the U.S., but you know, you've got to find someone like yourself and FlavorCloud in order to answer these questions that you're covering right now.
Totally, good point. And I'll give you an specific example. In order to determine how much, if anything, is taxed and the duties apply, there's a system from the World Commerce Organization, WCO, which they call harmonized system. And every product has a harmonized system code, HS code. And merchants need to know whenever they sell something, what that HS code is of their item, whether they sell shoes, bags, cosmetics, sports goods, or whatever it is. And a lot of merchants struggle with that. What HS codes do I use and put into my shopping platform to identify the correct duty? And so that's where accountants like Mike or us can be helpful. And I will say this: it's getting easier in that we are working and we already have a system where we can auto classify items of merchants. But it's on the surface, it sounds simple. Okay, I just pay a duty. But if you dig a little bit deeper, it is really complex, and there are challenges, no questions about that.
Yeah, you guys have both made some really great points here. I hope everyone's been taking note of these. So let's just, really, what else matters in terms of these duties?
Well, I mentioned there's two concepts, right, where, and that's at the forefront of merchants' mind. Either you pay as a customer at checkout. So when you go online, you find an item you like, you put it into checkout, and then you want to confirm your order. It gives you the shipping rates plus the duty taxes. That's called DDP, delivery duty paid. We generally recommend to do that because then it's a better customer experience, because customers only pay once at checkout. Once they have paid the duties at checkout, then the shipment just can be sent across border to the customer, and everything is good. Now, the other option is that, and some merchants do that, and I'll tell you in a second why, that they say, no, I don't want to collect duties and taxes at checkout. I let the customer pay when they receive the item. That's called DDU, is an abbreviation for deliveries duty unpaid, right? Because you don't pay at checkout, you pay later at delivery. Now that has some issues and some benefits too, I will say. The benefit is the cost at checkout is lower. So therefore, the thinking goes by merchants that more customer will proceed with the purchase. So the abandonment rate of checkout is lower if you don't collect duties because the cost of the purchase is less, right? However, it's a bit short-term thinking because you have to pay no matter what once you deliver it, right, or receive it as a consumer. And that's where the downside comes in. We see this happen from time to time where a customer receives the item and the carrier says, hey, wait a second, before I can give you the package and you get your fantastic shoes or bags or whatever you buy, you pay me X amount of dollars because you have to pay the duties and taxes. And then they turn around and say, no way, I already paid for those. And then they send it back. And guess what? The merchants has to pay for that return. Luckily, FlavorCloud provides a full return solution, but still costs because the carrier charges for that return. So there's a lot of thinking that has to go into this. Generally speaking, as I mentioned, we recommend to merchants to do DDP. The costs are just the consumer experience is better. And as a side effect, the cost actually will for the customer also be less because we have pre-negotiated brokerage handling fees. So there's a side benefit of that. But that's sort of the options, DDP and DDU, in terms of duties and taxes and to stay compliant.
Okay, great information here. I'm learning throughout this entire podcast here. So I'm back to playing devil's advocate. What else keeps online merchants awake at night?
Well, there's a number of things that keep merchants awake. The first one I would mention is around conversion rates and checkout. I just mentioned checkout abandonment rates, right? I mean, every conversation with a merchant will include a question about conversion and checkouts rate. You know, how do I make sure if I put a lot of marketing dollars into promoting my store and my products, how do I make sure that I not only get prospects to my website, but they convert at a high rate so that of 100 people, as many as possible convert and purchase. And to just give you a number, the average conversion rate is actually very low. It's about 2.5%. So of 100 people coming to a website, only 2.5% proceed to checkout and to a purchase. And think about what that means. If you just get that conversion rate up by 2 or 3 percentage points, you double your revenue, right? So conversion rates are really important, and then have a good checkout experience as well, so that stays really low. To give you another data point, the checkout abandonment rate is around 30%. So people who selected an item because they like it, they typed in their address and they're ready kind of to purchase, still 3 out of 10, once they're in the checkout in the cart, they abandon that checkout and don't proceed to complete the order. So that's quite interesting. So that's one thing that merchants really think day and night about: conversion rates and checkout abandonment rates. The second thing I would say is around the supply chain. And that's particularly the case more recently with all these tariff conversation, and then with the coronavirus that has created a lot of disruption for people. Where do I get my, where do I manufacture my products? What if the tariffs are being raised for China? Should I move to a different country like Costa Rica or Mexico, or maybe even Colombia, which we see happening? So thinking or considerations around the supply chain and making sure that whatever is sold on the website is actually available and can be shipped is a big consideration. And that's not just, which country I'm shipping for or manufacture from, but also, do I have one warehouse or multiple warehouses? Because people expect to get their purchases within a few days, right? And so you have to optimize sort of your warehouse and inventory infrastructure as well. The third thing we hear a lot is around sort of shipping rates. Obviously, that's a cost to the merchant, and the merchants won't pay themselves. They typically make sure that their customers pays in the end, even if they offer free shipping or discounted shipping or flat rate shipping. Still somebody has to pay, and usually it's the customer in the end. And so they are looking always for great shipping rates they can provide, but still have reliable network of carriers that they use, because they want to make sure that the parcel actually gets to the customer, because otherwise the experience for the customer is not very good. And then the last thing I want to mention is around custom clearance. A lot of merchants tell us they struggle with that, to get the parcel through customs as they ship cross-border. They can be customs clearance issues, and not just related to duties and taxes, but there are certain items that can be imported and others cannot. And to give you an example, sometimes it's almost random. In Spain, you cannot import chocolate. Don't ask me why. I'm a big chocolate fan, being from Switzerland. They don't allow imports of chocolate. And
Wow.
so you need to know all these things as a merchant. And so merchants really struggle with that, and they need help around that.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming. You're obviously on top of all of this. So if our listeners want to follow up, they have any follow-up questions or want to know more about FlavorCloud, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, the best is to just reach out. They can reach out to me or contact@flavorcloud.com, or to me personally, balthasar.wyss@flavorcloud.com, or they just can go to our website, flavorcloud.com. We're happy to help. We love cross-border. We are a team of experts in this area who love this. Now, I'm personally not a big shopper, but I love the idea of international, enable everybody to ship from anywhere to anywhere. I think that's absolutely critical, and take all the pains away, from creating the international shipping label to the customs documents. We produce all this automatically, to have tracking numbers from the carrier and to get great carrier rates, taking all that care so that merchants really can focus on innovating, on product development, on selling, and focus on what's essential for their growth. That's what gets me excited.
Great. And we can tell. So thanks again for being on today's episode of the Sales Tax and More podcast. We'll look to have you back in the future here. And for those of you who do need help with their state taxes, whether it be income or sales, go to our website, www.salestaxandmore. We got lots of free resources out there, lots of services and solutions to help make your life a lot easier. And that's the end of today's episode. We thank you all for listening. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to click subscribe and check out all of the resources we have out on the web.